Today we're starting a new series, new year, new series. And this year I'm going to try something new for me. It's very old for the church, very new for me. I don't think I've ever done this in the history of me pastoring, which is like 14, 15 years, I don't know. So I'm kind of excited about that in more than one way, but we're going to be starting a new series, and this year we're going to be doing it differently in that we will be following this collection of readings called the lectionary. Anyone know the lectionary? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. The word lectionary actually comes from a Latin word, of course it does, which simply means a collection of readings. A gathering of readings, literally, a gathering of readings. And it's an ancient practice that goes back deep into the life of the church and has been used by Christians all over the world for centuries and by many, many churches in the world today. It's ascribed a little bit more to traditional churches. So if you grew up in a traditional church, whether that be Catholic or otherwise, or a traditional United Methodist church or otherwise, most likely they were following the common revised lectionary or some deviation of that. Even though it's associated with traditional churches, it's really kind of a pretty simple and powerful idea. The lectionary is a way of reading through most of the Bible in a 3-year period. And so we're in year A, it's what they call it, year A. Next year will be year B, and then C, and then it starts over year A. And so each Sunday, a particular reading, and it follows the life of the church. So the readings around Christmas time are Advent related, and Easter, of course, gospel. And it includes 4 readings. The first reading, which is usually the Old Testament, a psalm, a second reading, which is usually the New Testament, and then a gospel reading. So every week in traditional churches, you'll read all of those, the first reading, the psalm, the second reading, and the gospel. So you're getting a little bit of the whole Bible every week. So over the course of this year, we'll be spending time with some of these. Some weeks we'll focus on the gospel reading, specifically around Lent. Other times we'll focus on the second reading, specifically around Pentecost. We'll do a series on Acts, which are the readings for that time. The start of this year, we're going to be looking at the first reading, first of the year, because it is readings from the prophets. So in year A, yeah, who said, yeah, we love the prophets. So we're going to be spending some time in the prophets, and over the next couple of weeks, reading the first readings, which are selections from the prophets. All that to say, that's all I had to say about that. So here's the thing about the word prophet. I'm going to talk about prophets for a second. There's a lot of words in the Old Testament for prophet. One of them literally means the mouthpiece of God. So it's this person who claims to speak for God. Now, anytime someone claims to speak for God, that's serious. What you'll see in the Old Testament is there's a lot of things said about false prophets. In other words, there's a lot of people who claim to speak for God who are absolutely not speaking for God. Okay, so anytime you set up a category where someone claims to speak for God, there's a lot of people who are going to claim to speak for God. So just because someone claims to speak for God doesn't mean they do. But the prophet is this. And a lot of times, sometimes people will think of prophets as ability to see the future, and that's not really their primary role. Sometimes the prophets would project out into the future and say, here's where you're headed. If you don't change X, Y, and Z, you will end up here. But for the most part, the prophets were dealing with the present, critiquing the power structures of their time. And their main job was to either advise the king, the king would listen, or critique the king if the king wasn't interested. Right? So they're playing this role. All right, so let me explain this in kind of a modern way. This is the best way I can unpack this. It's not perfect, but it's one way to think about it. In a democratic society, which we currently think still operate in, there's 3 branches of government, right? And they are Yeah. You guys catch that, right? Good job. You got the legislative branch, which makes the laws. right? And you vote people into office for that. You got the executive branch, which enforces them and provides this sort of executive leadership over it all. And then you got the judicial branch that says whether you're interpreting the laws correctly based on sort of founding documents. And ideally, each of these would hold each other accountable and not just do what one branch wants in an ideal situation. I'm not speaking about anything relevant to today. But there's really, in a democratic society, there's a fourth branch of government that we don't really think about because it's not a technical branch of the government, but it's an important one. And it's public opinion, especially in a place where people vote. It's public opinion, or even included in that, the free press. It's the voice that asks, is this really what we want? Is this who we want in charge? Are we okay with their decisions? It's this question that we're critiquing and asking, and in a democratic society, all of the people are invited into that process to say, I don't know. I think I might vote differently next time. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the invitation. So in the ancient world, the prophets kind of, in a sort of way, filled that role. They were the ones who were asking, are you sure about that? I don't think that's how it's supposed to work. I don't think this is a good idea. What are you doing, king? Now, they were much more eloquent than that, much more poetic. They spoke a different language. That language getting translated into English. It's a bit complicated. But at the heart of it, they're saying, hey, kings and governments, I think you're missing the mark. I think you're doing this in a way that's not supposed to be done. And they did it not just from a place of public opinion either. They wasn't like, because here's the thing, prophets would sometimes speak for the people, and they would say to the kings what the people wanted them to say, and those prophets were considered false prophets. In other words, it wasn't a democratic society in the role of the prophets. They weren't just speaking for the people or the masses or what the masses wanted. They were trying to speak to the heart of God. Not what people wanted in a particular season of political upheaval, but the bigger picture of how it's supposed to be, what God has in mind. And at the heart of it, if you look at the prophets, they're really critiquing the nations and the kings and the political officials around two questions, which Jesus summarizes as the two great commandments. Let's try that one. What are those? Some of you guys were like, it was gibberish last time, I'm being quiet. I get that. Yeah, that's fair. I would have too. We'll just let a few people talk. That's good. So they'd ask, are you loving God with all your heart, mind, and soul? And are you loving your neighbor as yourself? Now, sometimes, so there's a lot of prophets that are talking about idols and all this religious stuff, where they're like, they're mad at the way in which people are worshiping and they're desecrating the temple, and that's in there. But most of it is actually about whether they're loving their neighbor or not. Whether society has failed at caring for the least of these. Those who, if not advocated for, will suffer. And the prophets are saying, if that's happening, then we've got a problem. And we need to organize ourselves differently. We need to go about how we're doing this as a country differently. So today's reading in the lectionary, in the first reading, comes from Jeremiah 31. And it's kind of an unlikely place to begin because the prophets have some really hard things to say to nations and to kings. But here we start, the people who put together the lectionary is like, let's start the year with a little bit of pep. I'm sure that's what they were thinking. Because it's actually really fun. It's a fun, super nice passage about joy. And it's this picture of it's not directly saying, here's everything you're doing wrong. What it's doing is saying, here's what it would look like if you were doing it right. Here's what it would look like if we had gotten it figured out. So Jeremiah 31, we'll look at some verses in 7 through 14. Listen to how it begins. It says, sing with joy for Jacob. They're just coming out of the gate happy. Shout for the foremost of the nations, make your praises heard, and say, Lord, save your people, the remnant of Israel. So it starts from this place of singing and joy and shouting and praise. And this is what Jeremiah is asking. And each week we're going to have a primary question. Today we got a few questions we're going to try to answer, but the primary one is, what does joy, what does hope actually look like? He's going to answer this question. What does hope look like? What would the world feel like if things were as they should be? And he answers that question in a couple of ways. First, he imagines a destination. He says, there's this destination, this metaphorical promised land I was talking about earlier, this metaphorical place of arrival, this what we might call heaven on earth. There's a metaphorical, abstract destination that we're walking towards. And so the question becomes, how will we know we've arrived to this destination, this promised land, this heaven, this goodness? The second is he imagines the journey. And he asks the question, if we're going to go to this destination, how will we know we're on the right path? That's a very important question. I mean, first he starts with the end in mind. Here's what it's going to look like. And then he goes, okay, are we sure we're heading on the right path to get there? And he answers that question, that you know you're on the right path. And then he imagines what will be different in my life once I arrive, as well as I go on the journey. What will change? How will I know that I'm changing for the better? So number one, he imagines a destination. How will we know we've arrived? Here's what he says. Jeremiah continues. See, I will bring them from the land of the north and gather them from the ends of the earth. Among them will be the blind and the lame, expectant mothers and women in labor. A great throng will return. Right out the gate, you have to understand that the nation of Israel had a civil war. There was the north and the south. And Jeremiah's in the south. And he usually is talking to the people in the south of Israel, known as Judah. But look what he says here. I'll bring them from the land of the north, those brothers who are now enemies. A nation divided. I'll bring them from there too. And from where? All the ends of the earth. And then he lists them. Among them will be the blind and the lame, expectant mothers, women in labor. Here's how we know we will arrive. This promised land, this beautiful city on a hill, this New Jerusalem, all of these metaphors for heaven on earth or heaven itself, all of these words are pointing towards a future that is good. And here's how we know we'll arrive, because here's the simple truth. Many people think they've arrived already. And in our world, they'll tell you what it looks like. It's described by yachts, mansions, and gated communities. Unlimited DoorDash. That's my heaven on earth. Ultimate comfort for me and for the few people I love. Heaven on earth. I get my cabin in the woods. I get my resort on the ocean, beach. You know what? You fill in the blank. That's what we work towards. And we're told to work towards this picture of arriving. I've arrived, which is an illusion. You never quite arrive. If people, this is not on my notes, but let's just be honest with you. If people could arrive, like you get to a place where like, I made it. Oh, I beat that American dream. I won the game. There would not be trillionaires. Do you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Like if you could reach a place where like, I've arrived, then eventually people would arrive and they would stop accumulating. But that's not how it works. There's no arriving. You're going to always be going after more. So here's what he says. You're going to know you arrived, not because you reach a place of comfort, but because everyone reaches a place of comfort. And those are different. Because our world is built around a simple mindset. The only way for you to be comfortable is to make other people suffer. It's not how it should work, but it's how it currently works. It's this belief that there's only so much wealth to go around, there's only so much comfort to go around, there's only so much joy to go around, and if I don't carve out my piece of it at someone else's expense, then I'll go without. It's like Monopoly. We were playing the new Monopoly card game that they have. It's kind of a fun little game. Of course, how many play the board game? Absolutely ridiculous game, right? I mean, has anyone actually... I'm very curious. Has anyone actually finished it where there was a winner? The gamers in the room raised their hand. We can't stop until there's a winner. In Monopoly, there's a winner, right? You accumulate so much that everyone else is without. That's the world we live in. And it was like, I think originally a commentary on, the state of capitalism and all this sort of stuff, right? But now we're just like, oh, this is fun. I'll beat everyone else and take all their property. We were playing a card game, and we were playing the card game version, and there's a card, you accumulate property similar to a board game, but then there's a card you can play where you just steal people's property. And we were playing with 9-year-olds. They did not like that when it happened to them. They loved it when they had the card. And they were like, and I was just listening to this game as people were accumulating property, and they got all these properties, and then someone stole their entire set of properties, which you need. And they're like, that's not fair! And I was just sitting back, me and Alyssa working on a little puzzle. And I was like, it's not fair. But it's like too real. People's entire property seized. Their place to live taken up. It's too real. See, in Jeremiah's day, the kings felt like they had arrived. They lived in comfort and mansions and stuff. But Jeremiah says, no, you will know you've arrived when the people who are in that destination include the blind, the lame, the pregnant woman, the woman in labor. What he's naming in that list is he's trying to identify people who, without help, might not make the journey. I don't know if that's true for pregnant women or not. I've never been myself. But I imagine going on a very long journey, walking, maybe not what you want to do while you're pregnant. I don't know. But the blind and the lame would be individuals who, on a journey, would probably not make it unless someone helped them. He says, you'll arrive when there are people at your destination that wouldn't have made it without your help. In other words, the most vulnerable, the people whom the journey would be the hardest. So how will you know you arrived? Simple. The destination will include everyone. And until it includes everyone, we haven't arrived. As long as some people have to lose so that others can win, it's not the future God has in mind. Which brings us to the second point. If the destination is meant to include everyone, what does that say about the journey? Look good. The question becomes, how will we know we're on the right path? What does it say about the journey? So I love this. Jeremiah lays it out. And think about this, knowing who he has in mind already. They will come with weeping. It's not going to be easy. They will pray as I bring them back. I will lead them beside streams of water. On a level path, they will not stumble. Because I'm Israel's father. There's that old Irish proverb, the road will rise up to meet you. That's what Jeremiah is saying here. First he says, by streams of water. Of course, if you're traveling in the ancient world, streams of water means you're going to stay alive. It means you have fresh water to drink. Without it, you will die. You're able to drink on the journey. So he'll lead them by stream. And it's an echo to Psalm 23, of course. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He says that's the journey's going to be. You're going to have what you need. It might not be easy, but you're going to have what you need on the journey. And second, he's going to make the path level. In other words, he's going to remove the obstacles. Here's how our world works. Our world works like an obstacle course, and if you can get through it, you will survive. And it's true for every segment of society I've ever seen. I know the one that I've been part of, which is ordination. Let me tell you, the ordination route is a route of obstacles. And if you can overcome, they will give you a stole. Sorry, Christy. It's a rite of passage. You have to earn it. But you know it's the same for everything else. You want a promotion? What does it take? Who do you have to get past? What obstacles do you have to overcome? And you have to try harder, and it weeds out the ones below, and you rise to the top. You want to get tenure? You want to get your PhD? You want to get your master's? You're going to have to work for it. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging. It's an obstacle, and only a few. It's like the Marines. Will you sit in the cold ocean for 2 days? I don't know what they do. I don't know. But I was friends with a chaplain. Some of you remember him, Barron. Anyone remember Barron? He used to come here. His next post, he's retired now from the military. He was a chaplain in the Navy. Is that the Marines are in the Navy? Anyone? I'm talking to the wrong people. Okay. But he was stationed out in California where they were like, the really intense Marine training stuff. And I was like, man, they do need a chaplain. So I'm glad you're going there. That's serious. But that's how the world works. If you can survive it. That is not what the path looks like to our destination. It is not a series of obstacles that if you can overcome, you get in. Oh, how many places of worship, how many Christians, how many churches think of our path to God as a series of obstacles, and if you can get past them, then you're in. As if, narrow is the way, this one verse taken completely out of context means that it's supposed to be impossible for people. Sorry, friends, it's not what that verse means. The way to God's destination is not lined with obstacles, or if it is, the job of our community is to remove them. This is what diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like. I remember reading one of my favorite books, My Body is Not a Prayer Request. It's about disability ministry and disability justice, and the author made this profound case that she's only disabled if the world in which she lives in is unwilling to accommodate her. Ooh, okay. Do you see what God's doing here? He's like, hey, the blind and the lame, representing metaphorical people who might struggle to get there. Right? He's speaking in poetry here. Are going to be able to get there because the path will be level and straight and easy to follow, and it'll be cleared. The path will accommodate everyone, which is how we answer that question. How will we know we're on the right path? The path is able to accommodate everyone. And if your path to God's destination, whatever metaphor you want to use for it, isn't able to accommodate everyone and their unique needs and abilities, you're on the wrong path. The last one is simple. How will we know we're changing for the better? Jeremiah simply says this: "It will be like a well-watered garden, and they will sorrow no more. Then young women will dance and be glad, young men and old as well." And I just pause there, and I'm reading this, and I'm reflecting on this verse over and over again as I'm preparing for this sermon, and I can't help but see the ways in which this prophet, this poet, is trying to include more and more people. He's like, oh, also young women. Oh, which means young men. But not just young men, like old men as well. And so we're assuming old, like it's multi-generational. It's the lame, the blind. It's like he keeps going. He keeps adding more categories into this destination. And then he says, I will turn their mourning into sad gladness. I'll give them comfort and joy instead of sorrow. We'll know we're changing for the better. We'll know we're on the path. We'll know we're at the destination when the things in this world that should be undone are being undone. When oppression gives way to flourishing, drought gives way to well-watered gardens, fear gives way to celebration, and hope becomes a destination. Hope gives into reality. We no longer have to hope for it because it is now. How will we know that we're changing for the better? Everything broken will be restored. As we begin the series in the prophets, here's what Jeremiah gives us right out of the gate. God's vision of hope includes everyone, especially the vulnerable. Anytime God talks about everyone, God almost always in Scripture includes the vulnerable to remind us that, yeah, we mean everyone. Two, that God does not abandon us on the journey. That the journey is not some obstacle course that if you can overcome it, you get in. No, it's a journey that accommodates everyone and is made level so that everyone can arrive. Because the goal, people say like the goal is the journey itself, not the destination. Well, in this scenario, the goal is the destination. And when you put obstacles, you are keeping people from reaching where God wants them. God walks with us, provides for us, and one day the things that are broken will be reversed. As we begin the new year, I'm going to invite the band to come up for our closing song. As we begin the new year, I want to ask you a question. I want to ask you a question. I want you to sit and reflect on it for a second. In this world, there's a lot that is not as it should be. But I want you to ponder this. If there's one thing you could change in your life for the better, what would it be? If there's one thing that you could change in your life for the better, what would it be? God, we ask that you would, in fact, speak to us. As we move into a new year with you, we trust that you're able to meet us. We trust that you're able to use us. Help us to understand the ways in which we might participate in bringing heaven to earth and helping others along this journey we call life. That we might be obstacle removers. We might create space for everyone. That we might be, if but a pale reflection of what your community is meant to be. I saw this in Jesus' name. Amen.